Hello friend, I want to tell you about the Honda Civic car. Honda was one of the dominant companies in the hot hatch segment for years and remains so to this day. Their models featured high-revving, non-supercharged engines that drivers loved. With the end of production of the 8th generation Civic Type R, a certain chapter in automotive history was closed. The non-supercharged hot hatch is a thing of the past. That is why, despite its age, the Honda Civic FN2 Type R is already a cult machine. Honda Civic Type R. The combination of these words has for years meant emotions, fantastic performance, phenomenal tuning potential, amazing driving characteristics, high revs and reliability. Few manufacturers have been able to push a naturally aspirated engine as hard as the engineers from Tokyo, without sacrificing reliability and durability. The white Honda Type R is a classic. However, not everyone considered these cars to be true hot hatches. Too high performance, some said. Not versatile enough, others repeated. A certain problem of the Honda Civic Type R was their availability. The 6th generation of the Civic was not available at all in this version on the European market with the steering wheel on the left side. However, Honda offered us a great, real hot hatch in the form of models marked with the abbreviation BTI and BTEC. It was only in the 7th that we received what many dreamed of. A real Type R under the hood. There was a K20 engine, one of the best ever made. Amenable to modifications, and untouched, almost armored and always willing to turn to the stages. Europe loved the Type R unfortunately. The 8th generation of the Civic was the last in the form that we associate with the hot hatch of this brand. Still with a naturally aspirated K20 engine. Still with power around 200 HP and front-wheel drive. A classic. However, there were voices of dissatisfaction. The space-age appearance of the car did not bother the malcontents as much as the torsion beam in the rear axle. Engine. Honda Civic Type R FN2 received almost the same engine as its predecessor. The previous generation EP3 had an engine with the K20A2 designation, while the new model K20Z4. Capacity 2 liters. Power 201 horsepower at 7,800 revolutions per minute and torque 196 Nm at 6,800 revolutions per minute. The predecessor achieved maximum torque at 5,900 revolutions per minute and it was a value of 188 Nm. Power also went to higher areas, and the limiter is set at 8,200 revolutions per minute, to the delight of fans. Performance is completely satisfactory. 235 km per hour and acceleration time to 100 km per hour in 6.6 seconds is the very top in this segment. Well-stepped gearbox and great engine flexibility allowed Type R to be used successfully in rallies. In the A7 and N3 classes the car basically had no competition, although Clio RS was hot on its heels. What's broken? As is usually the case with Honda cars, the most durable and least problematic component is the engine. The K20 engine had a manufacturing defect, but it did not affect the family used in the Type R and even more so the Civic FN2. Of course, you have to reckon with increased engine oil consumption, but that depends on how you use it. The more the engine is tortured, the more top-ups you have to make. And in this respect, it is more reserved than TFSI engines working under such load. It is worth adding that although the manufacturer recommends 5W30 viscosity oil, in heavily used engines it is worth using something with a higher summer viscosity, e.g. 5W40 or even 10W60. Honda also allows the use of 10W40, which may come as a surprise to some. Of course, it is worth using top-shelf products and changing the oil twice as often as the manufacturer recommends, i.e. every 10,000 kilometers. The timing chain usually does not require servicing, and it can stretch slightly only during hard driving and high mileage. However, you should remember to adjust the valve clearance every 40,000 kilometers. After about this mileage, it is also worth changing the oil in the gearbox. This is where we come to the biggest and basically the only big problem of this model. The transmission is not one of the most durable, After 100,000 kilometers, the synchronizers start to refuse to cooperate. Usually the first two gears, which is a result of specific use. With such a high range of revolutions, it is often necessary to reduce from second to first gear, which the transmissions do not like. Most users complain about the gearbox not working properly, but this does not always mean that it is faulty. Often, the culprit is a worn clutch or clutch pump, so there is no need to panic right away. We warn against replacing these components at the first mechanic you come across. Gearbox repair is not overly expensive. It is worth adding here that special editions, including the Champion White and Special Edition, had a factory-limited slip differential. Fortunately, it does not require special servicing like in competition models. It is worth taking an interest in the transmission from these versions if the car is to be used for track fun or in various forms of motorsport. Apart from that, only small things are the subject of the extensive civicclub.pl forum and the Type R section. Sometimes it is the central locking, sometimes some engine sensor, sometimes something else from the electrics. In the 2009-2010 model years, a service campaign was carried out to repair the electrical harness, which could even lead to a fire. The first sign of problems related to this is the strange behavior of the electrics, switching on and off some receivers. In the suspension, even if something wears out, it is the wishbone or one of the cheap rubbers. Unfortunately, the Honda Civic 8 generation has not avoided quality mishaps. Even in standard models, the interior can squeak, and in the Type R with a much stiffer suspension it is even worse. Another problem is corrosion, which appears under the seals, around the sunroof and the connection between the roof and the windshield. This is one of those models that is worth weighing down with an anti-corrosion agent. It's hard to find a better alternative to a hot hatch in this model year range. The Mazda 3 MPS is more powerful, but also more expensive to buy and service. Cars from the VW group can suffer from more breakdowns. The French Megane 2 RS is slightly older, while the third generation is much more expensive. The closest here is the Clio 3 RS. Although the Honda Civic Type R is seemingly a technically advanced design, the cost of servicing it is not excessively high. The technology in this model has not departed too much from what was offered in ordinary petrol versions. The ICDTI diesel is more complicated than the K20 engine. It is worth using high-quality products and parts. Regular checks of the oil level, valve clearances and replacement of fluids will keep the engine in good condition for many years. The suspension is not complicated or expensive to repair. Also, the rear suspension service is out of the question. There is no major problem with access to parts, although not everything is cheap. It is best to find a supplier who deals with Hondas and knows the subject. You can easily buy even the most unusual elements, including tuning ones, but you will often have to look abroad. Access to used components is practically exemplary. It's worth calling the authorized service center from time to time and asking about the prices of parts. They're usually terribly expensive, but Honda can sometimes surprise you in a very positive way. The Civic FN2 Type R tires are usually 225/45 R17. This is a pleasant size because you will pay a lot for a high-class tire. There is no need to worry about fuel consumption. Skillful driving can bring considerable savings thanks to the great flexibility of the engine. Getting below 9L, 100 kilometers should not be a problem from a technical point of view. Apart from the gearbox, the car has no major flaws, does not suffer from any serious faults and is relatively cheap to run. Good access to specialist services and a large group of users in Europe only encourage people to buy it. We do too, because it is the last Type R of its kind. Thanks for listening to me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and rate my video. If you know of any problems with this car that I haven't mentioned, be sure to write about them in the comments.
I have good news for you. Now, if you are planning to buy a used car, or learn more about your car, you no longer need to search for the information you need on the internet. We have collected everything in one place for you, on the website carme.pro. Here you can find out everything about the car. what brakes and at what mileage, any problems with engines, chassis or gearboxes, which trim levels are better not to mess with, and how not to lose money buying a used car. You will learn all this on CarMe.pro.